to. I got them right here.
Put them on the table.
Humphrey Bogart died in 1957, but his bank account kept growing. When lawyers opened his will, they found something Hollywood had never seen before. The tough guy from Casablanca had secretly built a fortune worth $50 million in today's money. But that was just the beginning. His wife, Lauren Bacall, turned that inheritance into something even bigger. By the time she died, her estate had grown to over $26 million. Their son, Stephen, now controls a business empire that still makes hundreds of thousands every year. How did a chain-smoking actor become richer dead than alive? Humphrey Bogart entered the world on Christmas Day, 1899, right in the center of New York City's high society. His father, Belmont DeForest Bogart, was a well-known surgeon whose position opened doors throughout Manhattan's Upper West Side. His mother, Maud Humphrey, was a celebrated magazine illustrator whose work appeared on the covers of major publications. She was not only a leading commercial artist of her time, but also a strong supporter of women's right to vote, something that carried great social risk. Their home was filled with signs of privilege, from Belmont's impressive medical library to Maud's fashionable art. For their only son, it was a childhood surrounded by wealth and influence, though the glamour often hid much more complicated truths. Behind the polished image of the family, Dr. Bogart carried a hidden burden. After a horse-drawn ambulance crushed his leg, not long after he finished medical school, he was prescribed morphine for the pain. What started as treatment slowly became an opium dependency that he never overcame. Outwardly, he was still a respected doctor, treating the city's elite, but privately, the addiction wore down his health, his finances, and his family life. By the time he died in 1934, he had left $10,000 in debt and $35,000 in unpaid fees. Humphrey grew up in a world where appearances mattered more than honesty, and this shadow followed him through his youth. His mother, Maud, was the one who often carried the household. At her peak, she earned as much as $50,000 a year, which today would equal more than $1.5 million. Her work included painting ads for everything from baby food to soap, and she even used Humphrey as a model when he was still a child. But she was also deeply committed to the women's suffrage movement, organizing rallies and standing in front of crowds, demanding the right to vote. At home, however, affection was scarce. Humphrey and his two younger sisters, Frances and Catherine, were raised in a house where their mother insisted they call her Maud rather than Mother. Humphrey would later say that a kiss in their family was such a rare thing that it became an event. The Bogarts' lifestyle reflected their status. Their Upper West Side apartment was surrounded by Central Park and some of the most exclusive schools in the country. Summers were spent on a 56-acre estate on Canandaigua Lake, where croquet, boating, and tennis filled the days. On the surface, the children had everything, but the emotional distance at home left Humphrey feeling out of place compared to the warmth and ease many of his future Hollywood peers remembered from their childhoods. His education was chosen to fit the life his parents imagined for him. At Trinity School, founded in 1709, the goal was to shape boys into future leaders of Ivy League colleges and elite social clubs. But Bogart never fit in. He was withdrawn, more interested in fishing and chess than in schoolwork, and disliked the formal expectations placed on him. His classmates teased him for his stiff clothing and for his fancy name, while at home his mother discouraged him from showing feelings. His parents then enrolled him in Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, which had a reputation for producing America's power brokers. They hoped he would go on to Yale and eventually become a doctor. Instead, his rebellious streak took over. He failed 4 out of 6 classes, and stories spread of wild behavior, including one claim that he threw a headmaster or a groundskeeper into the school pond. Others said it was his smoking and drinking that did him in. Whatever the reason, by the spring of 1918, he was expelled, leaving his parents disappointed and his dreams of a medical career finished. At 18, with few options left, Bogart enlisted in the U.S. Naval Reserve. The armistice ending World War I came just 16 days later, but he was assigned to the USS Leviathan, one of the world's largest troop ships. Most of his service involved bringing thousands of soldiers back home from Europe. Once, After missing his ship, he was punished with 3 days of solitary confinement on bread and water. Despite these moments, his records described him as above average in proficiency and superior in obedience, and he was honorably discharged as a petty officer second class on June 18, 1919. That brief military experience would later give him a sense of realism in the tough roles that made him famous. His trademark scar and slight lisp became part of his identity, though the story behind them was never clear. Studio publicity once claimed he had been wounded in a naval battle, but the truth was that he had joined after combat had ended. Another version said a prisoner he was guarding struck him across the mouth with handcuffs during an escape attempt. Still others claimed it happened in childhood, possibly from a wooden splinter when he was 12. His Navy medical records noted several injuries, but made no mention of the scar. The mystery only added to his tough, wounded image on screen. When he returned to New York after leaving the Navy, he was directionless. His mother openly complained that he had no ambition and no career path. He tried working for the National Biscuit Company and later at a Wall Street brokerage, but he quickly lost interest. Instead, he spent much of his time sailing, riding horses, and socializing. To his parents, it seemed like wasted potential, but it was during this period that a family friend in the theater world offered him a job as an office assistant. Humphrey Bogart's path into show business began almost by chance. After returning from World War I in 1919, he was a young man with no clear direction and a shrinking family fortune. A friend of his parents, William A. Brady, a well-known theater producer and father of actress Alice Brady, gave him an office job at Brady's World Films studio. The work was dull, mostly paperwork and errands, but it quietly became the first step toward a career that would one day make him one of Hollywood's greatest stars. Few could have guessed that the man running papers for a family friend in 1919 would later be remembered as an American film icon. Bogart's move into theater was slow and filled with setbacks. From that office job, he became a stage manager for Brady's productions, working behind the scenes rather than in front of an audience. His first acting role came in 1921, when he delivered a single line as a Japanese butler during a Memorial Day performance. It made little impact. At times, he faced humiliating moments, scripts tossed in the trash, near dismissals, and once being saved only because an actress faked an illness to prevent a disastrous show. He never took formal acting lessons, and his nerves sometimes got the best of him, even causing him to flee the stage mid-performance. Through the early 1920s, he collected small roles on Broadway, slowly building a reputation, though one known mostly backstage rather than to the public. By the mid-1920s, Bogart became known on Broadway, though not for serious roles. Instead, he often played wealthy young playboys in light comedies. Dressed in flannel and looking every inch the idle rich, he was often typecast into shallow parts. He later recalled being called White Pants Willie, the man producers turned to for meaningless society scenes. Legend has it, he was the first to use the line, "Tennis, anyone?" to clear the stage, though whether that's true is still debated. Bogart himself admitted the roles were dull, little more than holding a racket and looking the part. In 1922, he suffered a serious blow when famed critic Alexander Woollcott reviewed one of his performances and dismissed him as inadequate. Coming from one of Broadway's most powerful voices, that single word nearly ended his career before it had truly begun. At just 23 years old, he was branded with a label that could have kept him off the stage for good. The same man who once carried that painful review would decades later be named the greatest male star in American cinema by the American Film Institute. His first attempt at film came in 1929, when Fox Film Corporation signed him for $750 a week, the equivalent of about $12,000 today. Between 1928 and 1934, he appeared in films like Up the River, 1930, A Devil with Women, 1930, A Holy Terror, 1931, and Body and Soul, 1931. But none made him a star. In Women of All Nations, 1931, his scenes were even cut entirely. Discouraged and ignored by audiences, Bogart returned to New York, convinced Hollywood had nothing to offer him. His personal life was just as turbulent. On May 20th, 1926, he married Broadway actress Helen Menken in her Manhattan apartment, but the marriage fell apart quickly. Menken, already successful, filed for divorce on November 18, 1927, claiming neglect and even abuse. She said Bogart cared more about his career than their marriage. Their divorce ended in less than 2 years, leaving them on speaking terms but deeply hurt. On April 3, 1928, Bogart married stage star Mary Phillips. She had a thriving Broadway career, while he was still chasing fame. Their marriage lasted 10 years, but they spent most of it apart. Phillips refused to leave New York for Hollywood, and Bogart grew busier on the West Coast. They even agreed to an open arrangement, unusual for the time, so each could pursue other relationships. By 1938, they quietly divorced. His third marriage, to actress Mayo Method, on August 21, 1938, was far more chaotic. The press called them the Battling Bogarts, and their Los Angeles home became known as Sluggy Hollow, after Method's nickname. Their marriage was filled with violent fights. Neighbors reported hearing glass shattering and even gunshots at night. Method, often drunk and jealous, once stabbed Bogart in the shoulder during a fight and left him unconscious and bleeding. Instead of going to a hospital, the studio paid a private doctor to treat him quietly so the scandal would not reach the public. Method also threatened him with a pistol and once set fire to their house. Their relationship, fueled by alcohol and rage, nearly cost him his life before finally ending in divorce in 1945. His career finally turned in 1935 with the Broadway play The Petrified Forest. As Duke Mantee, a gangster inspired by John Dillinger, Bogart captured audiences with an eerily realistic performance. The play ran from January to June, and when Warner Brothers adapted it into a film in 1936, they wanted Edward G. Robinson for the role, but co-star Leslie Howard insisted he would not appear unless Bogart was cast. The studio gave in, and the movie became Bogart's breakthrough. Years later, Bogart honored Howard by naming his daughter Leslie Howard Bogart. After The Petrified Forest, Warner Brothers signed Bogart to a contract. From 1936 to 1940, he appeared in 28 films, often as gangsters or killers. He was shot on screen by James Cagney and Edward G. Robinson more than once, and even his own mother called him Bogey the Baddie. Most roles were repetitive, but his reliability kept him working. Everything changed with High Sierra, released January 25, 1941. Bogart played Roy Earl, a criminal with a human side, and the performance won over critics and audiences. It showed he could carry a film not just with toughness, but with emotion. The success led directly to his role in Casablanca. That same year, The Maltese Falcon cemented his place in film history. As Detective Sam Spade, Bogart helped define the film noir hero, tough, witty, and bound by his own sense of justice. Directed by John Huston, the film became a sensation, earning 3 Academy Award nominations. From that point on, Humphrey Bogart was no longer just a working actor. He was a legend. Humphrey Bogart's role as Rick Blaine in Casablanca in 1942 did more than win over audiences. It turned him into a legend and created a character that would become the model for the American anti-hero. Rick, the world-weary American running Rick's Café Américain in wartime Morocco, was not even meant for Bogart at first. The studio had considered Ronald Reagan and George Raft before giving him the part. Some of the film's most famous lines, including "Here's looking at you, kid," were not even scripted. Bogart came up with them on the spot. At the time, he was 43 years old, nearly a decade older than Ingrid Bergman, who was 27. This was unusual in an era when leading couples were usually closer in age. Even so, the connection worked, and decades later, Rick Blaine still ranks among the greatest film characters ever created. In 2005, the American Film Institute named him the 4th greatest film hero of all time. The making of Casablanca was far from smooth. Production began on May 25, 1942, even though the script was not finished. Ingrid Bergman complained that she never knew from one day to the next how the story would end or who her character would be with in the final scene. Writers Julius and Philip Epstein, along with Howard Koch, often handed actors new dialogue just hours before filming. The last line of the film, "Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship," was not even in the original shoot. It was written later and recorded after filming had wrapped. Despite the confusion, The movie was completed in August 1942. What was expected to be just another wartime melodrama became one of Hollywood's greatest classics. Its success even surprised the producers, who had never predicted it would stand the test of time. Casablanca premiered on November 26, 1942, and no one expected it to become an icon. At the 16th Academy Awards on March 2, 1944, it received 8 nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director for Michael Curtiz, and Best Actor for Bogart, his first nomination despite more than 30 earlier films. The movie won Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. At the box office, it brought in $3.7 million in the United States by 1943, an enormous figure that would equal about $62 million today. This success came during wartime, when rationing and competition made it difficult for movies to perform well. Real-world events also helped. Just weeks before the 1943 Cairo Conference, where Allied leaders met to plan strategy, Casablanca was released, and its themes of resistance and sacrifice made it even more powerful to audiences. The film's success changed Bogart's life. Before Casablanca, Warner Brothers was paying him $2,500 a week, which is about $45,000 in today's money. After the movie's impact, he became one of the highest-paid stars in America. By 1946, his annual earnings had jumped to $460,000, which would equal about $7.5 million today. He was now Warner Brothers' biggest star and one of the wealthiest actors in Hollywood. The New Deal gave him the power to control his projects, and in 1948, he created his own company, Santana Pictures. Very few actors at the time had such influence, and Bogart's rise showed the industry the real value of a leading man with lasting screen presence. More than 50 years later, his place in history was made official. In 1999, the American Film Institute named him the greatest male star of classic American cinema, ranking him above Cary Grant, James Stewart, and Marlon Brando. The decision was made by more than 1,800 critics, academics, and professionals in the film industry. Bogart's image became a cultural symbol. In 1997, the U.S. Postal Service even placed his face on a postage stamp. His most famous characters continued to appear in popular culture, from Woody Allen's Play It Again, Sam in 1972, to Looney Tunes cartoons. In 2014, a British Film Institute poll placed Rick Blaine among the top 5 most iconic movie characters of all time. Bogart's persona, tough, romantic, and principled, still defines what it means to be a movie star. While Casablanca changed his career, another film soon changed his personal life. In late 1943, during the filming of To Have and Have Not, the 45-year-old Bogart met 19-year-old Lauren Bacall, who was making her screen debut. Their chemistry was instant and electric. At the time, Bogart was married to actress Mae Method, but the attraction was impossible to ignore. The two began a secret romance on set, often slipping coded messages to each other and sneaking away between scenes. Some on set noticed how Bacall's hands shook whenever Bogart was near. The connection sparked in 1944 and soon grew into one of the most famous love stories in Hollywood history. The romance came with scandal. The age gap between them was 25 years, and gossip spread quickly. Mae Method mocked Bacall by calling her "your daughter," trying to highlight the difference in their ages. Many fans considered the relationship shocking. Bacall herself later said that the age gap turned out to be one of the best things that happened in her life. Critics and gossip columnists filled their pages with stories, yet the bond between Bogart and Bacall only grew stronger. Against all odds, their marriage lasted for more than 12 years until Bogart's death, proving wrong those who had predicted failure. Mae Method did not accept the affair quietly. Known for her fiery temper, she fell deeper into alcoholism and paranoia as rumors of her husband's new love spread. She called his hotel room so often that it became front-page news. Her jealousy often turned violent. She once stabbed Bogart in the shoulder during a drunken fight, threatened him with a gun at a Hollywood party, and even set their home on fire more than once. Their explosive fights earned them the nickname the Battling Bogarts. At one point, she sent Bogart a telegram threatening suicide, in an attempt to pull him back, but by 1944, Bogart had reached his limit. He finally moved out in October 1944 and filed for divorce the following February. The case was handled quickly. On May 10, 1945, Methot filed for divorce in Las Vegas, and within 1 hour it was granted. Only 11 days later, on May 21, 1945, Bogart married Bacall at Louis Bromfield's Malabar Farm in Ohio. The ceremony was small, with only a few close friends present, but it made headlines across America. Bacall was just 20 years old, Bogart was 45, and together they promised to make their marriage last. Bacall later admitted that she had agreed to put her career second, because Bogart believed it was the only way their relationship could survive. Their partnership on screen was just as powerful as their love off-screen. They starred together in 4 films that became classics. To Have and Have Not, in 1944, first revealed their chemistry. The Big Sleep in 1946 brought Raymond Chandler's hard-boiled characters to life with sharp dialogue and intense attraction. Dark Passage in 1947 showed Bacall's character caring for Bogart through danger and suspense. Their final film together, Key Largo, in 1948, carried a darker tone, echoing the trials they had faced in real life. Audiences could not look away, and critics still call their screen chemistry some of the most unforgettable in film history. These 4 films turned their romance into legend and set the standard for Hollywood love stories. In 1948, Humphrey Bogart did something almost no Hollywood star dared to do. He walked away from the powerful studio system and created his own film company, Santana Productions. He named it after his 55-foot yacht, the Santana, which he loved dearly. For Bogart, it was more than business. He wanted control over the films he made, both creatively and financially. After years of feeling restricted at Warner Brothers between 1949 and 1953, his company released several striking noir films, including In a Lonely Place and Beat the Devil. Some of these would later become cult classics, but for all his star power, the films struggled to make money, and eventually Bogart was forced to sell the company. Still, his bold decision inspired actors like James Stewart and Henry Fonda to demand more freedom in their own careers, leaving a permanent mark on Hollywood. A year later, in 1949, Bogart made a purchase that stunned the industry. He bought a grand white brick mansion in Holmby Hills for $160,000, which today would equal about $2.79 million. The home quickly became famous as the gathering spot for the original Rat Pack, with stars like Judy Garland, Frank Sinatra, and David Niven filling its rooms with laughter, music, and endless drinks. Bogart and his wife Lauren Bacall were known for their wild and unforgettable parties there. The house was more than a home. It was the center of their social world. It was also where Bogart took his final breaths in 1957 before Bacall sold it to producer Ray Stark. Even after renovations, the mansion still carries the spirit of golden-era Hollywood. Bogart's love for the sea was just as strong as his love for film. In 1945, he bought the Santana from fellow actor Dick Powell. Nearly every weekend, about 30 times a year, he sailed along the California coast, often circling Catalina Island. Sailing gave him peace, a chance to escape the roles he played on screen. During World War II, although he was too old for combat, Bogart joined the Coast Guard Temporary Reserve and even volunteered the Santana to patrol the coastline. When he died in 1957, a scale model of the yacht stood at his funeral, a symbol of the freedom he always sought beyond Hollywood. But Bogart was never one to stay silent about matters beyond the screen. In October 1947, as the Cold War fueled fear across America, he and Bacall joined more than 20 Hollywood stars on a flight to Washington. They called themselves the Committee for the First Amendment. Their goal was to protest the House Un-American Activities Committee and its pursuit of alleged communists in Hollywood. Bogart told reporters, "This has nothing to do with communism. It's none of my business who's a communist and who isn't." His words made headlines everywhere. The protest placed him under enormous pressure from studios, government officials, and even his own agents, who feared for his career. Though he later softened his stance under pressure, the stand defined him as both a rebel and a defender of free speech. In 1952, Bogart finally won the recognition that had long eluded him. At the 24th Academy Awards, he received the Oscar for Best Actor for his role in The African Queen. He was 52 years old and had been acting for more than 2 decades. His competition included Marlon Brando in A Streetcar Named Desire and Frederick March in Death of a Salesman. Many thought Brando would win, yet Bogart took the prize. The film had been shot in the Congo under brutal conditions. Cast and crew were struck by malaria and dysentery. While Bogart joked he survived on baked beans, canned asparagus, and Scotch whiskey. The role of Charlie Allnut, the rough riverboat captain, became the crowning achievement of his career, and the award finally sealed his place among Hollywood's legends. A few years earlier, in 1948, Bogart had starred in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. The film, with a budget of $3 million, was a risky gamble. Studio head Jack Warner even questioned why Bogart's character had to die before the end. Director John Huston insisted, and the gamble paid off. The movie grossed $4.6 million in its first year and won 3 Oscars, including Best Director and Best Screenplay for Huston, and Best Supporting Actor for Huston's father, Walter Huston. It was the first time a father and son both won Oscars for the same film. Bogart's chilling performance as a man driven mad by gold remains one of cinema's greatest portrayals of greed and paranoia. Decades later, Breaking Bad even borrowed inspiration from it. By 1954, Bogart was already sick with throat cancer, but he gave one of his most unforgettable performances in the Caine Mutiny. Playing Captain Queeg, a naval officer consumed by paranoia and obsession, Bogart brought a raw vulnerability few had seen from him before. His nervous fidgeting with steel balls during the courtroom scenes became a cultural symbol. The role earned him his final Oscar nomination. Filming was tough. His voice was weak, his movements stiff, and the illness was already spreading. Yet critics hailed it as perhaps his most complex role, a haunting farewell to the tough guy image he had built. From 1955 on, Bogart knew his time was short. He had lost weight and coughed constantly, yet he refused to stop working. After selling his stake in Santana Productions for over $1 million, he planned new films with Bacall. Even after major surgery in March 1956 that removed his esophagus, 2 lymph nodes, and a rib, Bogart wanted to return to set. His weight dropped from over 150 pounds to just 80. Finally, too weak to climb stairs, he gave in. Friends described his last public appearances in 1956 as heartbreaking. At a dinner for the Rat Pack, Sinatra and Katharine Hepburn had to help him stand. On January 14, 1957, Humphrey Bogart died at the age of 57 in his Holmby Hills home. Decades of chain smoking and heavy drinking had caught up with him. Despite 2 surgeries, the cancer had spread beyond help. Friends like Sinatra and Hepburn were there in his final days. His death ended a career of over 75 films and 4 Academy Award nominations, closing the curtain on the golden age of film noir. At his death, Bogart left behind an estate valued at $5 million, worth about $50 million today. The money came not only from his acting, but also from smart contracts that ensured royalties from his films and use of his image. This wealth became the foundation for his family's future. Over time, the estate grew, thanks in part to merchandise and licensing deals. Some contracts alone brought in more than $5 million for a single product line. Lauren Bacall managed the estate after his death with remarkable skill. She built on what Bogart left, protecting his image while continuing her own acting career. When she died in 2014, her estate was worth $26.6 million, including nearly $10 million from her Manhattan apartment. She left careful instructions for her children, her pets, and her longtime staff, ensuring nothing was overlooked. Stephen Bogart, their son, later turned the Bogart name into a thriving modern business. He oversees the licensing of his father's image, approving about 75% of requests, and continues to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars each year through merchandise, advertising, and special partnerships. He once said with pride, "Hell, He's on a stamp. That ain't bad. Nearly 70 years after his death, Humphrey Bogart's name still carries weight. His face appears on everything from t-shirts to whiskey labels, and his estate continues to earn hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. The man who defied Hollywood studios and built his own path left not only a cinematic legacy, but also a lasting fortune for his family, proving that even long after death, Bogey remains one of Hollywood's greatest.